Drill sergeants, what was the funniest thing a recruit said?
Recruit fired all his blank ammo during ambush response training. He crawled in ditch to opposite where the aggressors were, and started throwing rocks at them. Die came running in middle of the road blowing his whistle and screaming, "What the F are you doing?" Recruit screamed back, throwing hand grenades. Drill sergeant. Without missing a beat, the die screamed out effing standing. And walked away.
This sounds like it's out of a movie. This is effing hilarious.
We had a strict rule to write official documents with a blue pen. It is a NATO standard and has its excuses, but all in all, it's one of those things. I had checked about 200 lines of weapons checkouts and ins when at the bottom of the page, it has 50 on one side of the page, there was one entry in black. As you would imagine, I found out who it was pretty quickly. Given the entry had his name and weapon number staring right at me. Now the military has this thing where you go through basic training, for everything. I mean, if you are given a pair of speakers, you are mandated to read the safety and usage instructions and give a signature for it, so they can't be held liable to some degree. This absolute piece of twig and sap looks at me with the most uncanny look when I confronted him about it. After a bit of friendly banter in front of his whole room, I ask, "So what is your excuse for using black ink?" "Sir, I've yet to get the formal safety and usage training for the blue pen, sir." He rewrote all 100 entries in blue pen that evening after being the only soldier to get training to use a blue pen instead of a black one. But man, that was a special moment where all the muscles in my face were fighting not to laugh. Edit. Thanks to you, add 1 CTED to games for asking about this. The reason he had to rewrite 100 is due to the system in place for keeping track of weapons and ammo. Can't say much, but there are certain ways to get info faster if you set it up in a certain way. But also because crossing out something was also a big no-no with weapons logs. So it screwed up our system to keep track of stuff and also made my commanding lose his brains when someone crossed something out. I'm not gonna get into the combination of black ink and crossing out with my CO.
Greater than this absolute piece of twig and sap. Lol.
Not necessarily what a recruit said but had to do. Imagine this. 0.0500 in physical training formation. Everyone is dressed in the proper uniform, gray shirt, blue shorts, white sock and a shiny new pair of New Balance dad shoes, except for Recruit Dumbass. Recruit Dumbass realized he didn't have clean white socks while getting ready and thought it would be okay to join the formation in knee-high, green, socks. The following conversation transpired. Drill Sergeant, DS, Trainee Dumbass, what the hell do you have on? TD. Ma'am, I didn't have clean white socks so I used my uniform socks instead. DS. Trainee Dumbass, do you know what covert ops is? TD. Yes, ma'am. DS. Trainee Dumbass, I want you to covert ops your ass over to the barracks and acquire a pair of white socks from your laundry bag. TD. Asterisk stares blankly, asterisk. DS. Low crawl your ass to the barracks and get the correct pair of socks in your damn feet. TF. Asterisk does what he's told and low crawls nearly a mile to the barracks. Nearly dies from exhaustion and humiliation. Asterisk. Sincerely, Trainee Dumbass.
The signature made me laugh the hardest.
I feel bad for the guy, but I gotta say it. His last name was Smelly. As in, smelly. And #X200B. So when I had him come into the class for the orientation, admin day the very first day, I ask everyone to stand up and give their rank, name, serial number. So when I heard, Private Smelly, I lost it. I felt so bad for the guy. Edit. I don't know what fully came of Smelly, but this was back in 2007 and I had heard he didn't make it through BMQ, and VED, voluntary release. This was in the Canadian Forces.
There are names I wouldn't join the military with. For instance, I went to basic with a PVT cherry.
In Navy boot camp we have a thing before battle stations called Amnesty Night. This is where we confess all the dumb poo we managed to get away with to our RDCs and not get in trouble. Our chief had a lisp, which we all talked poo about throughout boot camp, but never in front of him. We had a pretty short guy named Patterson that could do a perfect impression of our chief. Patterson proceeded to stand up in the middle of forward IG and said, "Why the F do I have to keep touching your dirty ASTHSTH kivist? You mother FERTHS make me sainthick." The Entra division was dying. The RDCs were in tears about to fall out of their chairs. When everything quietened down, our chief looked at us and said, "I effing hate you guys, but that wath effing funny." The entire division proceeded to die again. Edit. I can't spell.
At least he saw the funny side.
asked a private the difference between cover and concealment. Private said, "Drill sergeant, you asked what seems like a very important question which I am supposed to know the answer." However, this private was imagining not being called on, and was not paying attention to the question. Drill sergeant,
I admire your honesty. 100 push-ups.
I ordered the platoon to form up facing west. One troop asked, "Master Corporal, our west or your west?" I just walked away angrily and let his peers sort him out. I came out of my office and they were facing east.
Well, that's concerning.
Marching the troops back to the barracks after lunch, I noticed a recruit with a white stain on his hip pocket. I halted the platoon and got in the recruit's face. Me. Recruit, that white stain on your shirt better be because you are excited for this afternoon's training. Recruit, no sergeant. I am saving my snack for later. Me. What snack are you saving? Recruit, ice cream.
Recruit, that white stain in your shirt better be because you are excited for this afternoon's training. I am dying. That's classic DS. My DS would correct us when we would say coming DS. They would say, not all over my nice uniform you're not.
When I say down, you say, we are. When I say up, you say, we carted. Down. Asterisk, we are. Asterisk. Up. Asterisk, retarded. Asterisk. I legit had to turn and walk away for a minute.
The new chant of our Wall Street bets.
In basic training, stood by our beds, inspection of platoon commander. In she comes, walks around, asks everyone questions. Guy next to me, who I'm still mates with now, got asked what he did before he joined. He answered, proud as lunch and for everyone to hear, I sold condoms and nuts, ma'am. Her and the corporals just started laughing, couldn't help it.
Convenience store clerk? I hope.
Nope, vending machines. My dad tells me this story all the time. Back in the 80s when he was doing basic training, the DS was going down the line asking why everyone joined, and my dad was like, oh poo, I don't have a good answer for this, and was nervous. DS goes to the guy next to my dad, asks the question, and the guy says, to defend my country, sir. DS goes, that's bull poo, you're here for the money and the education. And that became everyone's answer.
I really needed a haircut, sir.
Not a DS, but doing my best to translate ranks etc. from Finnish military. I served as an instructor for new conscripts during the latter half of my own conscript service. We were testing how well the new conscripts had learned the ranks of our military. They would wait in line, and when it was their turn I'd show them a piece of paper with the symbol of a rank in it. They would address me properly, tell their name and say the rank. For example, Sir Corporal Sir, conscript last name, a captain. The rank depicted on the piece of paper I showed was corporal, which was also my rank and thus in my jacket, very visibly. The new conscript first addressed me, Sir General Sir. I raised an eyebrow and he quickly tried to fix his mistake. Sir Second General Sir, a rank that would be right below General if it existed, which it does not. The conscript behind him made a chuckle, so he fixed his mistake again saying, Sir Corporal Sir, conscript last name, I don't remember the rank you are showing. I said, you just said it. He went quiet in thought for a few seconds, then happily said, a conscript.
That conscript has Second General written all over him.
2002? I was just one of the recruits. Army Basic, FT, Leonard Wood. One of the field training days for learning some piece of gear. Don't remember what. Drill sergeant calls on recruit to sit the chair as a demonstration. Recruit obliges, obviously. DS walking around talking, explaining, platoon sitting in large circle around chair, DS. Almost as soon as DS starts talking, recruit's head is nodding off. By the time DS gets back around front, recruit is asleep. That's when the DS realized other recruits had been truthing when they said this guy had mild narcolepsy.
At basic I got the whole DS team laughing from a comment. DS starts yelling at me in my face about God knows what, on and on. He is from the deep south and has a super strong Mississippi accent. I am an immigrant from South Africa, my accent sounds English or Australian to US people. Only been in the USA for a few years and have been living in Oregon, and honestly I can only understand a bit of what he is saying. At the end he concludes with, do you understand the words coming out of my mouth, private? I replied, drill sergeant. No, I am really struggling with your accent, drill sergeant. There was silence for a bit, then they all started laughing.
A country drawl is a very thick accent for people who aren't from America or newcomers to English. Have a heavy Vietnamese population in my R, and when their kids are learning English, it's not uncommon for their parents not to understand cause they adopt the accent tears of joy.
I was not a drill instructor, but when I went through USMC boot camp in San Diego, we had a recruit that was a local from San Diego and had a reputation of being a really funny guy. This recruit, Recruit W, was very squared away and had both a near 300 PFT, a good fitness test score, and shot expert at the rifle range, so the DIS gave him some slack when he made a quick joke. By now it was a well-known platoon fact that Recruit W is from San Diego. At this point in time we're on third phase of boot camp, so we're back in MCRD San Diego from second phase, field, at Camp Pendleton, and we're going through a run of the confidence course, which is the iconic obstacle course with the rope slides, tall climbs, etc. Recruit W is climbing the Stairway to Heaven link, which is a very tall ladder-like structure, and when he reaches the top he calls out to the drill instructor below. Sir, Recruit W requests permission to speak to drill instructor Sergeant B, sir. The die, Sergeant B gives him permission to speak. Sir, this recruit can see his house from here, sir. The die, Sergeant B lost his composure and had to laugh out loud, and Recruit W had to do some extra push-ups and bend and thrusts when he got off the obstacle. Edit. Added photo link to the Stairway to Heaven at MCRD.
This is the best one here. I've tried to read this entire thread doing my best to hold back laughter to emulate the situation, but this one and good night sir are the ones that beat me in this case.
Not a DS. We had a specific response that we had to say if our TI or any other asked us a question in basic. They would say something, or if you had to go over to them, you had to say, trainee, last name, reports is ordered, when you got there or before you could answer. A lot of trainees screwed it up and would say, reporting, instead of reports. One day some new kid in another flight, still in his civilian clothing, said he was reporting to his TI, and when he got there our TI stopped our flight so we could watch what happened. That guy stood there reporting the weather and telling the TI what shapes he saw in the clouds because only effing meteorologists do the reporting. I'll never forget watching some guy sit there and tell 52 other people what shapes he saw in the clouds at the top of his lungs.
Do TIS, DIS, DSs just sit around after hours and come up with this poo? Like one of them says, I got one. The next mother that says, reporting, is going to have to pick shapes out of clouds for 20 minutes. While the other instructors nod along approvingly?
I don't know if they do for sure, but it's always been my guess they do. When we graduated we had the chance to ask our TI one question and he had to answer. We asked him where all his insults came from. He went into his office and brought out a 3-ring binder. I'd have to say there were probably close to 300 pages of pre-approved insults, sayings, and just random bullpootery. Kind of like a playbook on random poo to say and do haha.
Required to have creases in your uniform, and if you know anything about it you can sometimes F it up and give a shirt 2 creases. Commonly referred to as railroad tracks. On morning information for uniform inspection it was discovered someone had done this to their shirt. So in come the DIS. At one point one of them yelling asked, Recruit X, are you a train conductor? And sure as poo, he was before he joined. So he answered, sir, yes sir. Everyone got awkward quiet for what felt like 5 minutes, but I'm sure it was only 5 seconds. And then the group of them went on yelling at the next person in formation.
Lol had a buddy who went to a military college. He broke bearing while at attention. He grimaced because the sun hit his eyes, but it looked like he was smiling. Platoon leader comes up and asks him what's so funny. Is your dad a clown? His father was in fact a part-time clown.
One of my buddies has some amazing stories from DS time. My favorite was about a pair of trainees walking down the sidewalk towards an officer. The one trainee, A, was carrying a large box with both hands, and the other, B, was walking to his right and had nothing in his hands. The officer was getting ready to return the salute he knew was incoming, but the 2 trainees were visibly freaking out. How could a salute with both hands occupied? B got the bright idea to salute with his right hand, appropriately, and to salute for his buddy with his left hand and a resounding, good morning sir. This really needs the visual, but picture a GNU Force, Usain Bolt arm position, link. The drill sergeants were falling over each other to go tear them apart, stifling laughter the whole time.
So what are you supposed to do if your hands are full?
If you are on detail and working, then you address the officer verbally, and keep working. If you aren't, set the box down, salute properly, pick it up, and Charlie Mike. Edit. *C *Carly *M *Ike equals *C continue *M *Ishin, as in keep going. I thought that was one of the military terms that had crossed over into the Matrix. I had a friend tell me this story. In the Marines, a chit is similar to a demerit. A Marine had something wrong with his uniform and was going to receive a chit. The drill sergeant gets in his face and yells, "Private, what is a four-letter word that starts with C and ends with T?" The private thinks for a moment and sounds off back, "See, sir." To which the drill sergeant replies, holding back laughter, "No, private, a chit."
Not a DS. Back in basic there was a huge amount of importance put on iron increases. This was back before the Navy switched from utilities to digis. Anyways, our RDC was a turbo hardass 9-year senior chief. Chief Fowleys, I think I spelled that right. So we're all doing morning inspection, having ironed our clothes sometime during the night, when Chief sees some random recruit just walking through the hallway looking like absolute poo. Chief called the recruit into our compartment, and had him take part in our inspection. This recruit's uniform looked like it had been balled up and steamed. To this day I still can't fathom how he managed to look so effed up. So Chief looked at this kid and his effed uniform and started laying into him with the usual, "You look like hammered dog poo. I've seen smoother nutsacks," etc. When Chief asks him, "Did you iron even a single article since you've arrived?" and the recruit replied, "Chief, I ironed my skivvies, Chief." Keep in mind we're all standing at parade rest as this was transpiring. That means you couldn't move or make a sound. So Chief, hearing that this kid ironed his skivvies, underwear, made him dress down to his skivvies and march around the compartment saying, "I ironed my skivvies, Chief." We almost effing died from holding in the laughter. There was another time during basic that was pretty good too. Chief Fowleys, like many RDCs, had a whole arsenal of insults at his disposal. But his favorite was definitely calling someone a bag of DKS. So this guy is running track, and he's struggling to keep a good pace. Chief starts motivating him with insults. I can't quite remember the earlier ones, but eventually Chief called this guy AP. That's when this recruit replied, "I'd prefer a bag of DKS, Chief." Basic was some of the most fun I had in the military.
When I went through Air Force Basic, we had a list of things we needed to have memorized and would regularly be quizzed on. The name and rank of every person in our chain of command from us to the president, ranks and insignia, and a bunch of Air Force trivia, etc. At the end of the chow hall line was the snake pit, the table where all the drill instructors sat, and they would randomly stop trainees and ask them these questions. As I was passing the table, I overheard one drill instructor brag to another that a girl in her flight had every single answer memorized well before most people usually do. That flight was behind me in the chow hall. As I sat down, they stopped that recruit and one drill instructor started drilling her with these questions. She answers every one perfectly and quickly. After 20 or so questions, the DI asks, "Who lives in a pineapple under the sea?" The recruit paused for a minute and said, "Excuse me, sir?" The DI yelled at the top of his lungs, "WHO lives in a pineapple under the sea?" The poor girl is just frozen and all the other dis shout, "SpongeBob SquarePants." They dismiss her and the DI asking the questions continues to shout the next several lines of the song.
Went to boot camp, Marines, in 2005. There was no room for bullpoo back then, and I assume that is still the case. Well, about halfway through boot camp one night we finish everything and are in our racks to sleep. The moment the drill instructor flips the light switch off, one of the recruits yells across the squad bay, "Good night, sir." So simple, so stupid, yet so absolutely hilarious. We spent the next 30 minutes getting IT'd in the dark. I still look back at the moment and laugh sometimes.
Sorry, but what does ITED mean?
Incentive training. Basically they make you do exercises to the point muscle fatigue. It is not at all a good time.
I had a recruit I nicknamed Giggles, as she couldn't help but giggle anytime anything was happening or we were just still. I came up with a rule that anytime I caught her, she had to tell me a joke, and if it sucked her whole squad had to push. Formation just before chow, we were sharking, and sure enough Giggles starts her thing. All right Giggles, let's hear it. Her response, how do you get an elephant in the subway? No clue Giggles. How do you get an elephant in the subway? You take the S out of sub and the F out of way. I walked 2 laps trying to figure it out, and finally turned to face her and said, Giggles, there's no F in. Just as I got it. All right Giggles, you win this round.
Infantry here. We had a guy get kicked out of basic training because anytime he was nervous or scared, he'd giggle. Drill sergeants didn't want a soldier who couldn't be quiet when he needed to be quiet, so away he went.
I don't remember what her MOS was, but it certainly wasn't combat arms lol. This was probably 15 years ago.
Last week of Coast Guard boot camp we all went to retrieve our civilian bags from storage. Told to grab all valuables and put them in a plastic bag and present them to the company commander to be collected and locked in their office. Everyone comes out with the usual wallets and phones. CC starts walking and talking about how we'll get the bag of shinies back on Sunday for our off-base liberty. He stops mid-sentence as he gets to one recruit. Conversation goes like this. CC, Howard, why the F do you have an iron? Howard, Petty Officer James, Seaman Recruit Howard. My recruiter told me it was smart to bring an iron to share with my company. The CC doesn't say a thing. Just turns on his heel, goes to his office and blasts Rob Zombie for 3 minutes, while we are still holding out our plastic bags. We had learned over the weeks that this is his method to prep us to get smoked. Comes back and tells Howard to put that damn iron away, and carries on with collecting the phones and wallets. We later learned that he did that so we couldn't hear his laughter and to compose himself. It was the one time we broke him.
I don't get why it's funny to have an iron.
When you go to basic they tell you to bring a few things as it'll be locked away during your time there. Only things that you can take with you from your civilian bag is extra razors, extra underwear, and extra socks. Everything is provided for you. You could go to basic with just the clothes on your back and still be fine. Bringing an iron was the last thing anyone expected. Mainly because they provide irons for you. Also we thought it was wild that he considered an iron as valuable.
I went through OCS a couple years back. Our RDC was a stickler for making sure that our socks were pulled all the way up during PT and would routinely yell at candidates to pull their socks up by yelling, "Motivate your socks." A couple days into OCS and we're doing PT and the RDC spots a girl with her socks bunched at her ankles. He rushes over and gets in her face and requests that she motivate her socks. She, being new, has no idea what this means yet. He yells it again and she started to panic. She looks down at her socks and yells at the top of her lungs, "You can do it, socks." RDC does an about-face and despite his best attempt he absolutely loses it while trying to make a hasty exit.
This reminds me of a story I had at OCS. Our RDC loved to yell and would often find any excuse to grab the other RDCs to join in with him berating a candidate. One morning during PT we had a transitional exercise between exercise stations where we had to bear crawl, broad jump, crab walk etc. between stations. So this RDC loved to make people uncomfortable by getting right in their face and screaming the transitional exercise. So he went up to my 2,230 pounds buddy, got right in his face and screamed, "Crab walk candidate." He didn't look affected at all as the rest of us turned to start crab walking, hands behind you, walking on all fours. Next thing we hear is this RDC losing his mind. "What the F *** are you doing candidate?" Over and over again. His voice started to squeak from the strain. So the rest of us stop and turn to see what's happening while the other RDCs are rushing over to join in on the fun and yell at my buddy. When I turn around I see 3 RDCs with red faces berating, screaming, and holding back laughter right in the face of this 2,230 guy. He is sidestepping down the field crouched down with his hands making pinching crab claws. While he's screaming, "I'm crab walking senior chief." The rest of us immediately started laughing while this guy had to crab walk like this 30 yards down the field. Funniest memory at OCS by far. His hands never stopped making the pinching motions.
I heard a recruit say this. DS. Did your mother send you here to piss me off? You write home and tell her you're doing a good job. Recruit. Sir, no, sir. My father sent me here to piss my mother off. DS spun on his heel and marched off with his head down and his hand over mouth. Asterisk edit asterisk. For those of you picking the flipo out of pepper, in 1976 at the USCG Training Center Alameda Boot Camp, You were not allowed to begin a sentence without using sir nor end it without using sir. The DIS at this facility are not called drill instructors. This is where the story occurred. If you were asked what word you must use when speaking to a superior, the proper response was, sir, sir, sir. Sir, yes, sir was used when asked a yes or no question. Sir, aye, sir was used when given an order. Getting that response wrong would get you at least 20 push-ups. Maggots.
Yay. If I was formed up around them and I heard that, I don't think I could have stopped myself from laughing.
Obligatory, not a DS. We had a newcomer to the unit, fresh out of training, and his squad leader was a very boisterous black staff sergeant. He decided to mess with the kid, very loudly asking him where he was from. The kid said he was from Wisconsin. The staff sergeant yells, "Wisconsin? I bet I'm the first black man you ever seen." Kid says, "No, sergeant, we have a black family in the county."
Side note, I did legitimately go to basic training with a couple dudes who'd never seen a black person, in person, before. They were both 17-year-olds from extremely rural areas, and had never even been outside their state before. Never been on a plane, never been away from home more than a week, tons of new experiences. That was a bit of a shock for me to learn.
During inspection, the section leader would walk up to every recruit and look them over for issues with their uniform. Everyone had a cap badge on their beret and it's supposed to be over the left eyebrow. Unfortunately for me, when I put my beret on, the cap badge was directly in the middle of my head. SGT walks up to me, stares me in the eye and says, "Private X, are you the mythical cyclops of the underworld?" Quite a few push-ups later and a lot of humiliation, I finally figured out what was wrong. Never made that mistake again.
Think this answer might be backwards to your question, but when I was in Air Force field training we had a cadet, Scooby, pronounced with a long O. Naturally everyone called her Cadet Scooby, as in Scooby-Doo, which she did not appreciate. Apparently we weren't the first to come up with this joke. Anyways, Cadet Scooby was acting as flight commander that day and someone asked, "Cadet Scooby, may I ask a question?" Cadet Scooby then immediately corrected the slip of the tongue. It's pronounced SCO by. The drill sergeant happened to be standing next to me at this time and said under his breath, "Roo-ro raggy." The few of us that could hear him let out a muffled laugh and then he turned to us and smiled. Still to this day one of the funniest, "you had to have been there" moments, and "Roo-ro raggy" is still something I laugh at.
I would have abused that joke a lot.
Obligatory, not a DS. We were on the grenade training range in groups of 3. This is where there are various stations where you and your group have to throw dummy grenades at things. When you're the one throwing, you are supposed to yell to your group, "Cover me while I throw my grenade." This one guy from the south with an accent to match yelled, "Cover me while I throw this here grenade," before he lobbed it. I had never seen the DS monitoring that station laugh so hard.
Navy Basic back in early O. We had just come from Freedom Hall and were finally going to the NEX for our first phone calls since we arrived. Our RDCs put on their most menacing faces and told us exactly how it would go, and that no matter how tempting or how clever we thought we were not to touch the candy machines or we would be caught. Now it's my division and our brother division, so like 120 or so recruits. We get there and line up and just wait our turns for the phone booths. Everything seems to be going smooth and we're almost done when I notice one of the RDCs is just eyeballing this one guy and practically breathing down his neck. RDC bent down and in a quiet voice that naturally we all heard he says, "Were those M&Ms good, B?" OMG, you'd think this dude's soul flew out his body. His face turned red and just dropped. He was terrified and practically shaking. For the rest of the day the RDCs followed him around making comments about M&Ms. The next morning we wake up to go start PT and B is gone. No one says poo. We get to Freedom Hall and there is B and the RDC that caught him. B has been doing rifleman drills since 5 a.m. He hasn't eaten and is ready to puke. He joins us for our next hour of PT. I don't think he ever looked at an M&M the same after that.
Out of curiosity, how was he caught? Chocolate breath, colored lips, actually seen getting the candy?
Honestly, I have no idea. It was probably sound if I was to guess. It was one of those quarter candy machines that you crank the handle to make it dispense. It was set right in the middle of the room with the phone booths like some kind of booby trap. Betting as soon as that first click happened the RDC zeroed in on him and just watched the whole thing to let him think he got away with it.
In basic training environments, recruits are given a standard set of responses that they're supposed to stick to. They vary from service to service, but generally, the standard responses are some version of yes, no, I'll do that right away, I'll find out. Part of the head game that's played during basic training is getting into the habit of only answering questions using your standard responses. With that last one, the point is to try and remove, I don't know, from a recruit's vocabulary and replace it with, I'll find out. It's a mental thing. Unrelated to that entirely, people in the military wear hats. Your hat gets tucked into your pocket or stuffed into your pants, boot when you're inside, and as soon as you're outside, boom. Hat goes on. You always have your hat with you, just in case you go outside, because one of the first things you learn in the military is that people in the military wear their hats when they go outside. This concept is central to military identity, as silly as it may seem. So there was a situation where a recruit was holding a door open for his company mates to pass through. He was standing outside, holding the door open, but he wasn't wearing his hat. We were on a pretty tight schedule, he was a good kid, and I wasn't trying to make a scene. I walked over to him and in a hushed voice asked, "Recruit, are you inside or outside?" My intent was to prompt him to put his hat on, that was it. I was just trying to help a brother out. He turned to face me and, at the top of his lungs, shouted, "This recruit will find out, sir." I couldn't help myself. Oh, you're going to find out? You're going to find out? You're going to find out if you're inside or outside. You know what? Take 5 seconds. Find out. Go ahead, look around. Gather as many facts as you can. Go 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 go. 05, 04, 03, 02, 01. You're done. Recruit, have you reached a determination as to the description of your surroundings? Yes, sir. Well, speak freely. This recruit has assessed the situation and is overwhelmingly confident that he is outside. I then pulled his hat out of his pocket and placed it on top of his head. His eyes lit up with a, "Oh, look. He got it." I was trying to help him out, not yell at him. After he graduated, I linked up with him to tell him that situation was probably my absolute favorite thing that's ever happened in any of the classes that had come through.
Then it takes years to quell the urge to don a hat as you head outside. Not a DS. Back when I was in basic training. First night, we were all lined up to shower. The first shower they were pretty strict about time. 60 people in and out in 90 seconds. Wash the important parts and get out. Obviously we didn't do it fast enough. So this part explains why we were all mostly naked. It was summertime in Georgia, and they were super worried about dehydration, so they made us drink a canteen of water every night. The DS had us do it, then said to hold the canteen over our heads when done. After everyone was done, he said to dump them upside down so he knows everyone drank it all. One kid decided not to drink it all, and when the DS said to dump it, he said he didn't want to spill it everywhere. Oh poo. DS has us fill our camel backs up full and get back on the line, still in towels mind you. DS, right, face. Now unscrew the person's camelback in front of you. Left, face. Front leaning rest position move, that's the push-up position. Cue the water flooding everything. Literal gallons in each camelback. 60 plus people. It was mess. Then our towels start falling off as we do push-ups. Slowly everyone started to laugh a little as we all realized the ridiculousness of it all. Eventually the DS lost his composure and left the room. All he said was, "It's lights out now. That means I don't want to hear a thing until the morning. And this room better be clean." And walked out snickering.
Not a DS, but in my final PT test in basic training I crapped my shorts but also got my fastest time. My DS said Private Jack 11058, what got into you? Just before I barfed, I said, "It's not what got into me, it's what came out." He sniffed, retched, and ordered me to the showers.
Private Jack Poo. Ooh boy, not a marching NCO, Canadian Armed Forces, but I remember going to basic. They had us all single-filed into a classroom, and seated by name. So, of course, our marching NCO starts asking, "Why did you join?" The first unlucky fellow docent addressed the MCPL's rank and just goes on talking, gets blasted. We go around the room and for the most part it's pretty good. Then Buddy's turn comes up, he makes the same mistake as the first guy. Before the MC place can even start yelling, Buddy says, "I am sorry. Master Chief." Yes, Halo Master Chief. My MC place just stared at him, lightly chuckled, then the whole room burst into laughter. Buddy was from then on nicknamed Master Chief.
That's not a bad title to go by, to be fair.
Oh, he loved it. It was a happy tragedy in our platoon.
Not a drill instructor here, but I have one that I think is pretty good. In Navy boot camp from time to time we would have inspections. We would have to put on a certain uniform and stand by our racks at attention while the drill instructors walked around asking us questions we were expected to know the answers to. This time it was on the chain of command. Anyway, one of our chiefs, let's call him Chief Smith, was walking around, checking our uniforms, asking us things like, "Recruit, who is your commander-in-chief?" as an example of an easy one you hope to be asked. He gets to this one guy in my division, looks him straight in the eyes, and asks, "Recruit, who is your chief of naval operations?" This guy looks back at him and confidently shouts, "Chief, my chief of naval operations is Chief Smith, Chief." Upon which, Chief Smith pauses for a moment, mutters something to himself like, "Chief Smith? What the F?" then screams down this guy's throat like he's the clown at the drive-thru, "That's my effing name, asshole." At this point, all the other recruits standing close enough to have witnessed this burst into laughter, myself included. It was hilarious. This guy had just told a drill instructor that he was in charge of the whole Navy. Not only that, but Chief Smith himself lost it a little, too. We could tell he was trying his damnedest to hold in the laughter, but he actually had to walk away momentarily to regain his composure. Meanwhile, we're all still laughing, and he comes back and says, "Hey, stop effing laughing," then starts giggling himself and walks away again. It was amazing. The memory's a little hazy now, but I don't even think the recruit who answered incorrectly got in trouble. I think there was some unspoken rule that if you can make the drill instructor laugh, you wouldn't get in trouble.
I suffered from this, so I get to share. I was in an infantry basic training which was rather regimented, and I have no concept of how others were. We weren't allowed to say, "Roger, hooah," etc. It was, "Yes, no drill sergeant." The Dipu next to me responded to a question, unironically, with, "The private doesn't know. The private will educate himself," about a week into the roughest portion. 12 years later I still have scars on my hand from low crawling up and down that effing gravel hill. Another one was afraid of getting pink eye because of less than insert stupid poo he did greater than. I jokingly said, "Spray Lysol, it'll kill all germs." 10 minutes later we hear screaming from the bathroom. He actually did it. He cried. We spent 20 minutes washing his eyes out, and afterwards he knocked on the drill sergeant's door to snitch on me. DS on duty called me into his office to just confirm that it actually happened, and then smoked the F all 120-ish of us for an hour.
Greater than the private doesn't know. The private will educate himself. Did you go to basic with Dobby?
It felt like it. I haven't seen the movie, but I believe I remember him saying that's what he saw in a specific military movie about how you're supposed to speak to them. The drill sergeant was absolutely floored. It stopped him mid-step, and the entire rest of the day was spent correcting Private Dobby.
Not a drill, but had a few great ones while in basic. Grenade practice. Private couldn't figure out he was supposed to be on the other side of the wall from the grenade. Drill sergeant yells grenade inside your bay, private huddled against the wall inside the bay. Same thing for outside. Happens about 6 times until the drill sergeant puts more emphasis on inside and outside. Gas chamber. Private comes out of the gas chamber choking, eyes watering, spit and snot mixing on his chest, and goes to his knees. Company commander starts yelling and walking toward the private. Mid-sentence he stops walking like he just hit the buried cable on his invisible fence, stops talking and starts choking. Cap got a bit close to the exit and got himself another taste of CS. Barracks had a group of privates become the Skittles crew. They waited until everyone had left but the CQ, and waited for him to go check the upper floors. They posted guards at each landing on each stairwell, got into the day room and bought all the Skittles out of the vending machine. While splitting their loot, someone came by and saw it, asked for some Skittles, and they told him no, so he went to the CQ. As they were getting smoked and told they'd be getting an Article 15, the drills actually commended them for running a, mostly, successful raid. Also barracks. End of the day and we've got a little free time. Couple of privates get to talking about how they wrestled in high school. So they decide to have a match in the room. We're all standing around watching, laughing, cheering and having a good time. All of a sudden from behind us we hear, "I've got winner." Turn around and the drill sergeant is there. Expecting the usual, we all prepare for the half left face command. He looks at the two and says, "Y'all gonna finish or call it a draw?" He for real wrestled the winner. And then we all got smoked. Last but not least, US weapons. We've got this little 5-foot, high-speed ranger sergeant following us before he goes to drill sergeant school. He's like a pit bull on crack. I get my little quarter belt for the 60 and get in line. I get to the front, load my little ammo and do my first die motherfucker die. Sergeant Pitbull goes off, get some private. Get some. Make me come. What the F? I finish my belt and spend the next 30 minutes or so thanking God that I'm not gonna be in his company. Oh crap, I forgot about drill sergeant comedian. At the end of the day all our platoon's drills would leave but one and he'd do PT with us, depending on who stayed. You knew if you were doing push-ups, ab work or running. So Sergeant Comedian was ab work, he'd work us until it was almost impossible to stand up straight. Then he'd get us in formation and start telling jokes. I don't know if he just enjoyed screwing with his privates or he was preparing us for eventual capture and torture, but he seemed to take pleasure in seeing us laugh then double over in pain. More than a few times I had to roll off my bunk in the middle of the night to piss because my abs hurt too much to sit up.
We had the peanut butter bandits. If you went to sick call, you would be taken to a different dining facility than the one we usually used, because it was closer to the clinic. There usually weren't drills at this facility, because it was usually for people in training for longer and they were a bit more trusted. You also were given a paper baggie with any medicine you got for the medicine you were given at sick call. So what the people in 1st Platoon figured out was that if you went to sick call for something minor and got some minor medication like cough drops, you could stuff your baggie with peanut butter packets and keep it in your wall locker. Eventually a drill noticed the peanut butter packets in the trash, and someone in 1st Platoon admitted to what they did, and the entire platoon got called outside to get smoked while everyone else watched it happen from the windows while pretending to clean. The next day their senior drill sergeant replaced their banner with a label from a jar of Jiffy peanut butter on a stick, and instead of sounding off with their actual platoon name, they had to go by the Peanut Butter Bandits for over a week.
Not a DS, but about 3/4 of the way through basic my platoon had 2 platoon screw-ups. Every basic platoon has one, I was blessed with 2. One day screw-up number 1 forgot his canteen on his rack as we were reviewing hand-to-hand combat outside of the barracks. Anybody that goes to basic knows that you have to have your 2-quarts canteen on you, especially in the middle of an Oklahoma summer. DS recognizes this and tells him he has 3 minutes for him to go to his rack and come back down in full battle rattle, vest, helmet, ruck, essentially 60 pounds of gear. As he leaves, the DS turns to the platoon and says, "I am going to make this mother effer cry without raising my voice. Anybody want to take that bet?" If he didn't cry, we got a 5-minute phone call home. If he did, it was going to be an hour of hard PT. Sure enough, screw-up comes down in full battle rattle and the DS has him to combat rushes, going from prone to running for 2 to 3 seconds, and back to prone, for about 10 minutes. Didn't raise his voice once and the guy was crying in 5. DS turns to us, calls us all dumb FS for taking the bet and proceeded to PT us for not 1 but 2 hours.
Story from my father in basic. My dad was a country white boy from South Carolina and his DI was a black man. One day during an exercise my dad stepped on the DI's boot. The DI, of course, lit him up. My dad stood there and took it, but he's always been a hothead. DI, where you from, country boy? Dad, South Carolina, drill sergeant. DI, South Carolina? How many slaves you still got down there? Dad, now pissed, none, drill sergeant, but we used to have a lot. According to my father, the drill instructor grabbed me and my exit from the training facility was far more hasty than graceful. The drill instructor called for a master corporal to take over training so he and I could spend some quality time together the rest of the day. He spent the next several hours in the sawdust pit where, according to him, the sergeant kindly opened my eyes to the series of mistakes I had just made. Edit, this occurred in 1973, for cultural context.
My drill sergeant told me I couldn't organize a gangbang in a W house. He was not amused when I told him, the next day, we'd have to be at the W house by 2 p.m. or the platoon would lose its deposit. The push-ups were worth it.
Any other punishments? Was the platoon banned of brothels?
I was watching a parade. The D had the parade and was about to turn it over to the OC when he went for a skate on some loose gravel. One leg went really high, think Monty Python Ministry of Silly Walks. He didn't go base over apex though, recovered, and took his place. The officer said what he needed to. Sar Major. Sir. The D came back, around, saluted. About turn. Parade. Dismiss. 300 cadets did as ordered. As soon as they marched off they dissolved into laughter. Even the officer had a smirk.
Not a drill, but I had a kid on my fire team, 18 yo fresh out of basic, kept falling out of runs, and one day I'm ripping him a new one and I tell him that the 1SG is 49 years old and he's running better. Kid tells me, but Sergeant, he's been doing it longer. What in the actual horsepoo?
That sounds like a hell of an softball for the sergeant. I'll be sure to give you extra practice to make it fair then.
My cousin signed up for the military. He's talking to the older members of the family who had served and said to my granddad, "So, what happens if they give me an order I don't like? I can say no, right?" My granddad looks at him deadpan, "Boy, your feet would not touch the floor." I guess he took the advice to heart. He had a long career and ended up serving in the Grenadier Guards and got to protect the Queen. I was the recruit here. I walked out of the chow hall and a DS thought that I was still chewing food and yelled at me asking me if I was chewing outside the chow hall, and I told her that I was not chewing still. She did not believe me, came over to me and asked me again if I was chewing food. I again told her no, then proceed to open my mouth as wide and I could and went, "See, no food." I somehow survived that encounter and I feel like she was too dumbfounded about what I just did.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.